The first gunshot shattered the silence of the Montana dawn, sending a flock of startled birds into the pewter sky. Olivia Greene flinched and pressed a hand to her swollen belly, her breath forming small clouds in the crisp autumn air of 1876. She had nowhere left to run. Deer Lodge was her last hope, a desperate gamble that might save her and the child growing within her. The stagecoach had abandoned her here yesterday, the driver unwilling to take her any further after she'd been honest about her dwindling funds. 7 months pregnant, alone, and with nothing but a small carpet bag containing her remaining possessions, Olivia had spent the night huddled in the doorway of the general store. Now, as morning broke over the rugged landscape, she knew she needed to find work, and quickly. Main Street was beginning to stir as Olivia smoothed her wrinkled dress and attempted to make herself presentable. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple bun, her once fine clothes now showing wear from her journey west. She was 22 years old and had never imagined finding herself in such circumstances, a widow before her child was even born, fleeing the shame her late husband's gambling debts had brought upon her in Boston. "You looking lost, madam?" An elderly man sweeping the boardwalk outside the telegraph office gave her a curious glance. "I'm looking for work, sir," Olivia replied, squaring her shoulders despite her exhaustion. "Any kind of work. I can cook, clean, so." The man's eyes dropped to her belly, and his expression turned sympathetic but uncomfortable. "Not much hiring in town for a woman in your condition. Most folks here are particular about such things." Olivia bit her lip, fighting back tears of frustration. She had encountered this reaction in every town she'd passed through. "Is there anyone who might need help? Anyone at all?" The old man scratched his chin. "Well, there's the Yeardley place, big ranch north of town. Lost his housekeeper last month. Word is he's been looking for help, but—" He trailed off, clearly doubtful. "Thank you," Olivia said quickly, hope flaring in her chest. "How far north?" "'Bout 5 miles. Follow the main road out of town, take the fork at the large cottonwood. Can't miss it." He hesitated. "But Mr. Yeardley, he's particular. Keeps to himself since his folks passed. Don't be disappointed if he turns you away." Olivia nodded her thanks and began walking. 5 miles seemed an impossible distance in her condition, but she had no choice. The morning air was cold enough to make her shiver as she trudged along the dusty road leading out of Deer Lodge. 2 hours later, her back aching and feet swollen, Olivia finally spotted the ranch in the distance. It was larger than she'd expected, a sprawling main house with several outbuildings, all situated against the backdrop of towering mountains. A wooden sign reading "Evergreen Ranch" marked the entrance to a long drive. As she approached, she could see men working in the corrals, breaking horses and moving cattle. The activity gave her hope surely a place this size would need domestic help. Olivia made her way to the main house, a 2-story structure with a wide porch wrapping around it. She climbed the steps slowly, one hand supporting her back, the other clutching her bag. Before she could knock, the door swung open. The man who stood before her was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a stormy sky. He couldn't have been more than 30, but there was a hardness to his features that suggested he'd seen more than his share of difficulty. His dark hair was slightly too long, and a few days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. "Can I help you?" His voice was deep and wary as he assessed the unexpected visitor on his porch. "Mr. Yeardley?" Olivia asked. He nodded once, his expression guarded. "My name is Olivia Greene. I heard in town that you might be in need of a housekeeper." She forced herself to stand straighter despite her fatigue. "I'm seeking employment." Yates Yeardley's eyes traveled from her face to her protruding belly and back again, His jaw tightened. "I'm afraid you heard wrong, madam. I'm not hiring." He began to close the door, but Olivia, desperation overcoming her usual decorum, placed her hand against it. "Please," she said, her voice steady despite the plea. "I can cook, clean, mend. I'm a hard worker, Mr. Yeardley. My condition won't interfere with my duties, I promise you." "Your condition is precisely my concern," he replied bluntly. "This is no place for a woman about to have a child. There's no doctor for 20 miles. "I still have 2 months," Olivia countered. 2 months in which I can be of service to you, and after I can work with the baby. I've done it before, caring for others' children while tending to my duties." Yates's eyes narrowed. "Where's your husband?" The question hit her like a physical blow. "Dead," she answered simply. 6 months now." Something shifted in his expression, not quite softening, but a subtle change nonetheless. He studied her for a long moment, taking in her travel-worn appearance and the determined set of her jaw. "You walked here from town?" he finally asked. "Yes," he cursed under his breath. "Come in before you collapse." He stepped aside, holding the door open wider. Relief flooded through Olivia as she entered the house. The interior was spacious but clearly in need of a woman's touch. Dust had accumulated on surfaces, and there was a general air of disorganization to the living area. "Sit," Yates commanded, gesturing to a chair at the kitchen table. "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday noon," Olivia admitted as she gratefully sank into the chair. Without comment, Yates moved to the stove where a pot of coffee was keeping warm. He poured a cup and set it before her, then cut a thick slice of bread from a loaf on the counter, slathering it with butter and preserves. "Eat," he said, pushing the plate toward her. Olivia didn't need to be told twice. She tried to maintain some dignity as she ate, but the food was too welcome after her long journey. Yates watched her silently, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed over his chest. When she'd finished, he spoke again. "I can't offer you a position, Mrs. Greene." Her heart sank, but before she could protest, he continued, "What I can offer you is my name." Olivia stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "I beg your pardon." Yates ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable but resolute. "A woman in your condition alone won't find decent work anywhere in this territory. But as Mrs. Yeardley, you'd have a roof over your head, food for yourself and your child, and the protection of my name." "You're proposing marriage?" Olivia asked incredulously. "A marriage of convenience," he clarified. "You need security. I need someone to put this house in order. It's a practical arrangement." "But we're strangers," she protested. "Better to be married to a stranger than starving with a newborn," he said bluntly. "I won't touch you. You'll have your own room. Once the child is born and you're recovered, if you wish to leave, I won't stop you. But the offer stands." Olivia's mind raced. What he was suggesting was madness. Yet as she looked at his steady gaze, she sensed no threat, only a straightforward offer of protection. And when she considered her alternatives, "Why would you do this?" she asked softly. "Take on a pregnant widow and another man's child." Something flickered in Yates's eyes, a shadow of old pain. "Let's just say I know what it means to be without options." He straightened up. "You don't need to answer now. Rest here tonight at least. There's a spare room upstairs. In the morning, if you want to return to town, I'll have one of my men drive you." He left the kitchen before she could respond, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. Olivia sat alone at the table, one hand resting on her belly as the child within her shifted. "What do we do?" she whispered to her unborn baby. Her options were painfully clear. Return to town, where no respectable establishment would hire her. Try to make it to another town, with even less money than before. Or accept this stranger's unlikely offer, becoming a wife in name only to a man she'd just met. Upstairs, The room Yates had indicated was small but clean, with a narrow bed and a window overlooking the mountains. Olivia set her bag down and sank onto the bed, the events of the day catching up to her. Despite her churning thoughts, exhaustion soon pulled her into sleep. When she woke, evening had fallen. Soft lamplight filtered under her door, and the smell of cooking food reached her. Olivia rose, straightened her dress as best she could, and made her way downstairs. Yates was at the stove, his back to her. The kitchen was warmer now, both from the cooking and from a fire burning in the adjacent sitting room. "You know how to cook?" she asked quietly. He turned, seeming unsurprised by her presence. "Enough to survive, nothing fancy." "May I help?" He gestured to the table, which he'd already set for two. "Just sit. You still look ready to fall over." Olivia obeyed, watching as he dished up plates of beans, cornbread, and venison. It was simple fare but smelled delicious. He set a plate before her and took the seat across the table. They ate in silence for several minutes before Olivia gathered her courage. "If I were to accept your proposal," she began carefully, "what exactly would you expect from me?" Yates set down his fork. "You'd run the household, cook, clean, mend. The same duties you came seeking employment for. In return, you'd have a home, food, protection. And after the baby comes, as I said, you could leave if you wished, or stay, raise your child here." He paused. "This is a good place for a child, fresh air, space to run. And us? What would we be to each other?" His expression remained impassive. "Companions, perhaps, in time, partners in the running of this place. I'm not looking for love, Mrs. Greene, if that's your concern." "Nor am I," she replied quickly. "My husband—" She stopped, the pain still fresh. "Love is not something I expect to find again." Yates nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. "Then we understand each other. The decision is yours." After dinner, he left her alone, retreating to what appeared to be a small study. Olivia sat by the fire, weighing her options, until the grandfather clock in the corner struck 9. Rising with determination, she went to find him. Yates was at a desk, reviewing what looked like ledgers. He looked up when she knocked on the open door. "I accept your offer," Olivia said simply, "but I have conditions." A hint of surprise crossed his face, followed by something like respect. "Name them." "First, I want to contribute fully to this household. No treating me like an invalid because of my condition." She took a deep breath. "Second, I want honesty between us. No secrets that could harm either of us or the child. Third, if I choose to leave eventually, I want your word you'll help me establish myself elsewhere." Yates considered her for a moment, then nodded. "Agreed. I have one condition of my own." "Yes. Your child will bear my name. If you stay, the child grows up as a Yeardley. If you go, the child still carries my name. No one will ever question its legitimacy." Olivia hadn't expected this. "You would claim another man's child as your own. A child deserves a father's name," he said firmly. "Even if that father is only one on paper." His words stirred something in Olivia: gratitude, but also confusion about this man who would make such an offer to a stranger. "Then yes," she said. "I accept all terms." "Very well." Yates stood. "We'll ride into town tomorrow, find the preacher." Just like that, her fate was decided. Olivia returned to her room that night with her head spinning, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake or saved herself and her child. The next morning, Yates had clothes waiting for her, a simple dress that must have belonged to his mother or perhaps the previous housekeeper. It was slightly large but would accommodate her growing belly, and it was cleaner than anything she currently possessed. They rode into Deer Lodge in a wagon, neither speaking much. The town looked different in the light of day, smaller than she'd remembered, but busier. People on the boardwalk stopped to stare as Yates helped her down from the wagon, his hand strong and steady under her elbow. The preacher was a kind-faced man named Reverend Thompson, who asked few questions when Yates explained they wished to be married. If he was surprised by Olivia's condition or the hasty nature of the ceremony, he kept it to himself. The wedding was brief, witnessed only by the Reverend's wife and the local blacksmith who happened to be passing by. Olivia spoke her vows in a clear voice, though her heart hammered in her chest at the strangeness of it all. When Yates slid a simple gold band onto her finger, his mother's, he'd explained earlier the reality of what she'd done hit her fully. She was now Olivia Yeardley, wife to a man she'd known for less than a day. Afterward, Yates took her to the general store, insisting she select fabric for new clothes and any personal items she might need. The shopkeeper's wife, Mrs. Hollies, eyed Olivia's condition and new ring with poorly disguised curiosity. "Didn't know you were courting, Mr. Yeardley," she remarked as she cut lengths of calico. "Some things are private, Mrs. Hollies," Yates replied evenly. Of course," the woman said, though her eyes gleamed with the prospect of fresh gossip. "And when is the blessed event expected?" "December," Olivia answered before Yates could respond, deciding to take control of the narrative. "We're both very excited." Mrs. Hollies' eyebrows rose slightly, but she managed a smile. "Well, congratulations to you both." By the time they left the store, Olivia felt drained from the effort of maintaining a facade of normalcy. In the wagon, Yates glanced at her with what might have been concern. "You handled that well." "People will talk regardless," she said tiredly. "Better to give them a story they can accept." He nodded, a hint of approval in his eyes. "That's true enough." They returned to the ranch, her new home, in the early afternoon. One of the ranch hands, a weathered man called Charlie, approached as they arrived. "Boss, we've got trouble with the north fence line." "Looks like someone's been cutting the wire." Yates's expression darkened. "Again? Show me," he turned to Olivia. "Can you manage here? This may take some time." "Of course," she replied, already mentally cataloging what needed to be done to bring the house to order. As the men rode off, Olivia entered her new home with a strange mixture of trepidation and determination. She was now mistress of this house, peculiar as the circumstances might be. Taking a deep breath, she removed her shawl and got to work. The next week passed in a blur of activity as Olivia set about transforming the neglected house. Yates had been living like a bachelor since his housekeeper left. Meals were haphazard, laundry piled up, and dust had gathered in every corner. Despite her condition, Olivia worked from dawn till dusk, determined to prove her worth. Yates said little about the changes, but she noticed him lingering longer at meals, his eyes taking in the clean tablecloth, the organized kitchen, the fresh-cut wildflowers she'd placed in a jar on the table. "You don't have to work yourself to exhaustion," he commented on the 7th day, finding her scrubbing the kitchen floor despite the late hour. "I'm not," she insisted, though her back ached fiercely. "I just want to finish this before bed." Yates frowned, then without warning crossed the room and took the scrub brush from her hands. "Enough, the floor will wait till morning." "But you made a condition honesty," he reminded her. "Honestly, you look ready to collapse, and that can't be good for the baby." Olivia sat back on her heels, suddenly aware of how tired she truly was. "I just want to earn my keep." Yates's expression softened slightly. "You already have, 3 times over." He offered his hand. "Come on, I've got something to show you." Curious, Olivia allowed him to help her to her feet. He led her upstairs to a room next to her bedroom that she hadn't yet tackled in her cleaning frenzy. Inside, she was surprised to find a freshly painted space with a small bed, a rocking chair by the window, and a beautifully crafted wooden cradle. "You did this?" she asked, running her fingers along the smooth edge of the cradle. Yates shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. I've been working on it evenings. Thought the baby would need a proper place. Emotion welled in Olivia's throat. It was the first truly personal gesture he'd made toward her and her child. Thank you, she managed. It's beautiful. He nodded once, awkward in the face of her evident emotion. Well, get some rest. Dr. Harris is riding out tomorrow to check on you. Dr. Harris. But you said the doctor was 20 miles away. He is. I sent Charlie to fetch him. At her surprised look, he added gruffly, part of the deal. You and the baby need looking after properly. With that, he left her standing in the nursery, staring after him with confused gratitude. Dr. Harris arrived the next day, a jovial man in his 50s who treated Olivia with professional courtesy. He examined her in the privacy of her bedroom while Yates waited downstairs. Everything seems to be progressing normally, the doctor assured her. The baby's position is good. You're a bit underweight for this stage, but nothing concerning given your recent circumstances. Olivia knew he was delicately referencing her obvious recent arrival and hasty marriage. Will the baby be all right? I believe so, Mrs. Yeardley. Just make sure you're eating well and resting appropriately. He packed his bag. Your husband seems quite concerned for your welfare. Yes, she agreed, uncertain how else to respond. Downstairs, Dr. Harris spoke privately with Yates before departing. Olivia watched from the doorway as her supposed husband listened intently, nodding occasionally at whatever instructions the doctor was giving. What did he say? She asked when they were alone. That you're working too hard, Yates replied, his tone making it clear he'd already suspected as much. That you need more rest and better food. I'm fine, Olivia insisted. You're not, he countered. And from now on you'll have help. Help? I've hired Mrs. Wilkins from town to come 3 days a week for the heavy cleaning, and you're to rest each afternoon. Olivia bristled at being managed. That wasn't our agreement. I'm to earn my keep. Our agreement was that you'd contribute fully, not work yourself into an early grave, Yates said firmly. This isn't negotiable, Olivia. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the surprise of it momentarily silenced her. Taking advantage of her silence, he continued, I've also asked Alina Tucker to visit. She's the midwife hereabouts. Dr. Harris says you should meet her before the time comes. Olivia relented, recognizing the sense in his arrangements. Very well, thank you. The autumn days grew shorter, and as October gave way to November, Olivia found herself settling into a routine at Evergreen Ranch. Mrs. Wilkins came regularly as promised, a cheerful widow who seemed delighted to have found employment, and asked remarkably few questions about Olivia's situation. Alina Tucker, the midwife, proved to be a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who had delivered most of the children in Deer Lodge County. She visited twice, pronouncing Olivia healthy but too thin for a woman growing a whole other person. The relationship between Olivia and Yates remained cordial but distant. He spent his days working the ranch with his men, coming in for meals and occasionally sitting with her in the evenings, though conversation between them was still stilted. One evening in late November, as the first snow dusted the mountains, Olivia was knitting by the fire when Yates entered the sitting room. He stood watching her for a moment before speaking. That looked small for a baby blanket. She glanced up, surprised he'd noticed what she was making. It's not a blanket, it's a hat for you. Your ears get red in the cold. Yates blinked, clearly caught off guard by her observation and the gesture. That's thoughtful, it's practical, she corrected, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. Can't have the ranch owner freezing his ears off. A hint of a smile touched his lips, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, softening the hard lines and making him look younger. Practical, he agreed, sitting in the chair opposite hers. Speaking of practical matters, we should discuss names. Names for the baby. It'll be here soon enough. Olivia set her knitting aside, surprised by this new development. In the weeks they'd lived under the same roof, Yates had been respectful but had kept a careful distance from matters concerning her pregnancy. "I hadn't thought much about it," she admitted. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to be involved in that decision." Yates shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable but determined. "The child will bear my name. Seems right I should have some say in what goes before it." "That's fair," she conceded. "Did you have something in mind?" "If it's a boy, I'd like to call him Thomas after my father." He hesitated. "But if you had a name picked already—" "I didn't," Olivia assured him. "Thomas is a fine name. And if it's a girl," Olivia considered for a moment, "I've always been fond of the name Grace." "Grace Yeardley," Yates tested the name. "That's a good name." They fell into silence, but it was more comfortable than their previous quiet moments. Olivia resumed her knitting, aware of Yates watching her hands work the needles. "My mother knitted," he said suddenly. "Used to make me a new sweater every winter." Olivia looked up, surprised by this personal revelation. "When did she pass?" "5 years ago. Influenza. My father followed 6 months later. Some said from a broken heart, though I think it was more likely the drink he took to." "I'm sorry," she said softly. "It must have been difficult losing them both so close together." Yates nodded, his gaze on the fire. "It was. This place has been in the family for 3 generations. Never thought I'd be running it alone." "And now you're not," Olivia observed quietly. His eyes met hers, something unreadable in their depths. "No," he agreed. "Now I'm not." That night marked a subtle shift in their relationship. Over the following days, Yates began to share more about himself, small details about his childhood on the ranch, stories about his parents, explanations of the running of the cattle operation. In turn, Olivia gradually revealed pieces of her own history, her upbringing in Boston as the daughter of a schoolteacher, her marriage at 19 to Edward Greene, a charming but ultimately reckless man whose gambling had left her destitute and pregnant after his death. "How did he die?" Yates asked one evening as they sat by the fire, snow falling heavily outside, Olivia's hands stilled in her lap. "He was shot in a dispute over cards. I wasn't there, but they said he accused another player of cheating." She swallowed hard. "When I went to identify his body, all I could think was that I didn't recognize him. The man I married would never have ended that way." "People change," Yates said quietly. "Yes, or perhaps I never knew him at all." She looked up, meeting Yates's steady gaze. "That's why I made honesty a condition between us. I can't live with secrets anymore." Yates held her gaze for a long moment. "Fair enough. Then there's something you should know." He took a deep breath. "There's trouble brewing with a neighboring rancher, Marcus Blackwell. The cut fence lines Charlie found, that was his men. Why would they do such a thing? Blackwell wants this land. Has since my father's time. He's been buying up smaller spreads all around, and Evergreen is the last piece he needs to control all the water rights in this valley." Yates's voice was grim. "With the fence lines down, his cattle mix with mine. Makes it harder to separate them come roundup time. Can't you report him to the sheriff?" Yates gave a humorless laugh. "Sheriff Daniels. Blackwell has him in his pocket." "No, this is something I'll have to handle myself." Concern filled Olivia. "What will you do?" "Nothing dangerous," he assured her, reading her worry. "Just wanted you to know why security's been tightened around here, why I've asked the men to ride in pairs." "I appreciate your honesty," she said. "Part of our agreement," he reminded her, then added more softly, "and I find I don't like keeping things from you." The admission hung between them, charged with meaning neither was quite ready to examine. Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks and looked away. "It's late," she said, struggling to her feet. Her belly was now so large that simple movements had become challenging. Yates rose immediately, offering his arm for support. She took it gratefully, hyper-aware of his strength as she leaned on him. At the foot of the stairs, she paused. "Yates." "Yes, thank you, for telling me about Blackwell, for not treating me as though I'm too fragile to handle the truth." He looked down at her, his expression serious. "You're many things, Olivia Yeardley, but fragile isn't one of them." The compliment, for that's what it was, she realized warmed her in a way the fire hadn't. "Good night, then." "Good night," he replied, watching as she made her way slowly up the stairs. The baby came early during the first week of December as a blizzard raged outside. Olivia woke in the pre-dawn hours to a sharp pain lancing through her abdomen. At first, she thought it might be false labor. Elena had warned her about this possibility, but when her waters broke an hour later, she knew this was the real thing. She managed to make her way to Yates's room, knocking urgently. He opened the door almost immediately, as if he hadn't been sleeping deeply. "It's time," was all she needed to say. What followed was a blur of activity. Yates helped her back to her room, then roused the ranch hands. Charlie was dispatched to fetch Elena Tucker, while another hand rode for the doctor. But the blizzard made travel nearly impossible, and hours passed with no sign of either. Olivia's labor progressed rapidly, the contractions coming closer together. Yates remained with her, his usual stoicism replaced by barely concealed worry. He wiped her brow with a cool cloth, held her hand when the pain became unbearable, and spoke words of encouragement that seemed to surprise them both. "You're doing well," he told her as another contraction racked her body. "You're strong, Olivia, stronger than anyone I know." She clung to his hand, drawing strength from his steady presence. "I'm scared," she admitted between ragged breaths. "I know," he said softly, "but I'm right here. I won't leave you." When it became clear that neither the midwife nor the doctor would arrive in time, Yates took charge. He'd helped deliver calves and foals, he reasoned, and while a human birth was different, the principles couldn't be that dissimilar. Olivia might have laughed at the comparison if she hadn't been in such pain. Instead, she nodded, placing her trust in this man who had become, against all odds, her rock in the storm. "Tell me what to do," he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Just catch the baby," she managed, before another wave of pain took her words away. What happened next was both terrible and wonderful, the most excruciating pain Olivia had ever experienced, followed by the most profound relief and joy as her daughter slipped into the world and let out a robust cry. "She's here," Yates said, his voice filled with wonder as he held the squirming, red-faced infant. "Olivia, she's perfect." Tears streamed down Olivia's face as Yates placed the baby on her chest. Tiny hands, tiny feet, a shock of dark hair. She was indeed perfect. "Grace," Olivia whispered, brushing a finger against the baby's cheek. "Grace Yeardley." Yates sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes fixed on the baby with an expression Olivia couldn't quite decipher. "She has your nose," he observed softly. "And her father's chin," Olivia replied without thinking. A shadow passed over Yates's face, a reminder of the reality of their arrangement. This wasn't his child, no matter what name she bore. But before either could speak further, Grace let out another cry, this one demanding attention. Yates helped Olivia situate the baby to nurse, his hands gentle but efficient. Once Grace was contentedly feeding, he stood. "I should check if there's any sign of Elena or the doctor," he said, his voice carefully neutral again. "Yates," Olivia called as he reached the door. "Thank you." He paused, looking back at her and the child. Something in his expression shifted, softened. "You did all the work," he said. "I just caught her." Then he was gone, leaving Olivia to marvel at the tiny life in her arms and the strange circumstances that had brought her to this moment. Eleanor Tucker arrived just after noon, making her way through the diminishing storm on a sturdy mule. She checked both mother and baby thoroughly, pronouncing them healthy despite the unusual circumstances of the birth. "You did well, Mr. Yeardley," she told Yates, who had been hovering anxiously nearby. "Not many men would have handled it so calmly." "I wasn't calm," he admitted, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I was terrified." Eleanor patted his arm. "That's fatherhood for you, get used to it." She stayed for 2 days, showing Olivia how to bathe the baby and teaching Yates how to swaddle her properly. When she finally departed, promising to return in a week to check their progress, Olivia and Yates found themselves truly alone with Grace for the first time. "She's so small," Yates commented as he watched Olivia rock the baby by the fire. "But strong," Olivia added. "Like her namesake, Grace." Yates said the name with a hint of reverence. "It suits her." That night, after Grace had been fed and settled in her cradle, Yates hesitated in the doorway of the nursery. "Would you like me to sit with you for a while?" he asked, uncertain in this new territory. "You should try to rest when she's sleeping. I could watch her." Exhausted but touched by the offer, Olivia nodded. "Thank you. That would be helpful." She retreated to her bedroom, leaving the door ajar. From her bed, she could see Yates sitting in the rocking chair beside Grace's cradle, his large frame incongruous in the small nursery. As sleep claimed her, her last thought was that her daughter might have lost one father, but she had somehow gained another. The weeks following Grace's birth brought new rhythms to Evergreen Ranch. Olivia's days revolved around the baby's needs, while Yates resumed management of the ranch, though he spent more time near the house than before. Each evening, he would hold Grace while Olivia prepared dinner, talking to the infant in a soft voice Olivia had never heard him use with anyone else. Christmas approached, and with it, a thaw in the coldness that had characterized the beginning of their relationship. Yates returned from a trip to town with a small pine tree, which he set up in the sitting room. Together, they decorated it with strings of berries, paper ornaments Olivia crafted, and a few precious glass baubles that had belonged to Yates's mother. On Christmas Eve, as snowflakes drifted past the windows, Yates presented Olivia with 2 packages. "These are for you and Grace," he said, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Olivia opened the larger one first, gasping at the beautiful wool shawl inside, dyed a rich blue that reminded her of the Montana sky in summer. "It's lovely," she said, running her fingers over the soft fabric. "The other one's for Grace," he prompted. Inside the smaller package was a silver rattle, delicately engraved with the baby's name and birth date. "Yates, this is too much," Olivia protested. "No," he said firmly. "It's not enough." Embarrassed, Olivia retrieved her own gift for him, the hat she'd finished knitting, along with a matching scarf. "It's not as fine as what you've given us," she apologized. Yates accepted the package, his expression softening as he examined the handiwork. Without hesitation, he put the hat on. "Perfect fit," he declared, wrapping the scarf around his neck. "Best gift I've had in years." "Really, really," he confirmed. "Made with your own hands, that means something." They sat by the fire, Grace sleeping peacefully in her cradle nearby, and for the first time the silence between them was truly comfortable. "I never thought I'd have this," Yates said suddenly. "Have what?" He gestured to the room, the tree, the baby, her. "A family. After my parents died, I figured I'd live out my days alone on this ranch. Then you showed up on my doorstep." Olivia studied his face in the firelight, seeing the vulnerability he usually kept hidden. "I never thought I'd be here either," she admitted. "When Edward died, I thought my life was over." I certainly never imagined finding safety again, let alone. She trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. Let alone what? Yates asked, his eyes intent on hers. Contentment, she finally said, though it wasn't quite the word she'd been reaching for. Yates seemed to understand what she couldn't express. He reached across the space between their chairs, taking her hand in his. "Merry Christmas, Olivia." "Merry Christmas, Yates," she replied, not pulling away. The new year brought fresh challenges. January's bitter cold was followed by a February thaw that turned the ranch into a muddy mess. Then came March winds that howled around the house like hungry wolves. Through it all, Grace grew and thrived, developing a personality that delighted both Olivia and Yates. "She has your stubbornness," Olivia observed one evening as Grace, now 3 months old, refused to settle for sleep. "And your determination," Yates countered, pacing the floor with the baby on his shoulder. These casual comments attributing his traits to Grace, treating her as if she were truly his daughter, became more frequent as winter gave way to spring. Olivia noticed, but didn't remark on it, afraid to disrupt the delicate balance they'd achieved. Their relationship had evolved into something neither had anticipated. They were partners in the running of the household and in Grace's care, but there remained an invisible line neither had crossed. Yates still slept in his room, Olivia in hers. They shared meals, conversations, even laughter, but not the intimacy of a true marriage. Yet Olivia couldn't deny that her feelings for Yates had grown far beyond gratitude or companionship. She found herself watching him as he worked around the ranch, admiring the strength in his shoulders, the gentleness in his hands when he held Grace. She noticed how his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how his voice deepened when he was tired. She was falling in love with her husband, and the realization was both wonderful and terrifying. As for Yates, his behavior toward her had certainly changed. There were lingering glances, casual touches that seemed to carry more weight than before. Evenings spent talking long after Grace had been put to bed. But he never spoke of his feelings, never indicated whether he viewed their arrangement as anything more than the practical solution he'd originally proposed. The matter of Marcus Blackwell continued to cast a shadow over the ranch. Throughout the winter, there had been minor incidents: cattle found in the wrong pastures, a watering hole fouled, another section of fence damaged. Yates dealt with each problem stoically, but Olivia could see the toll it was taking on him. In early April, matters escalated. One of the ranch hands, a young man named Jesse, was beaten while checking fence lines on the property's northern border. He returned to the ranch bloody and bruised, reporting that 3 of Blackwell's men had ambushed him. "They said to tell you this is just the beginning," Jesse told Yates, wincing as Olivia cleaned a cut on his forehead. "Said if you don't sell, worse will come." That night, after Grace was asleep, Yates paced the sitting room like a caged animal. "I should ride out there, confront Blackwell directly." "That's exactly what he wants," Olivia argued, "to provoke you into doing something rash. So I just wait for him to hurt more of my men, destroy more of my property." Yates ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "What kind of man would that make me?" "A smart one," Olivia insisted. "You need to handle this legally. Write to the territorial marshal, document every incident, build a case against him. That could take months, then we'll endure for months." She stepped in front of him, halting his pacing. "Yates, please, think of Grace, think of you," he finished softly. "All of us," she amended. "This isn't just about your pride, it's about our safety." The word "our" hung between them, pregnant with meaning. Yates studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. We'll try it your way. For now." The next day, Olivia set about helping Yates document every incident involving Blackwell over the past year. They wrote a detailed letter to the territorial marshal, requesting an investigation. Yates was skeptical that it would lead anywhere, but he seemed relieved to be taking some form of action. Spring brought new life to Evergreen Ranch. The cattle herds grew as calves were born, the gardens Olivia had planted began to flourish, and Grace became more active every day. By May, she was attempting to crawl, much to Yates's delight and Olivia's alarm. "She'll be running before we know it," Yates predicted proudly as Grace scooted across a blanket on the sitting room floor. "Don't rush her," Olivia chided, though she was equally proud of their daughter's progress. Their daughter. The thought came naturally now, though Olivia still occasionally reminded herself of the truth of their situation. One evening in late May, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Grace asleep in her cradle nearby, Yates broke their comfortable silence. "It's been 6 months," he said quietly. Olivia's heart stuttered. She knew exactly what he meant. 6 months since Grace's birth. 6 months since the end of their original agreement. "Yes," she acknowledged, keeping her voice steady. "You could leave now if you wanted. You've recovered." "Grace is strong." He stared straight ahead, not meeting her eyes. "I'd honor my promise to help you establish yourself elsewhere." Olivia felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath her. "Are you asking me to leave?" Now he did look at her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "No. God, no, I'm asking if you want to. Do you want me to?" she countered, her heart pounding. "No," he said again, more firmly this time. "I want you to stay, both of you, but not out of obligation or necessity, not because of our agreement." He took a deep breath. "I want you to stay because you choose to." "Why?" Olivia pressed, needing to hear him say it. Yates reached for her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. "Because in these past months, what started as a practical arrangement has become something else entirely, at least for me." His voice roughened. "I love Grace as if she were my own blood, and I love you, Olivia. I think I have almost since the beginning, though I fought against it." Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes at the confession she'd longed to hear. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've been so afraid to say it, afraid you still saw this as nothing more than convenience." "There's nothing convenient about loving someone," Yates said with a hint of a smile. "It's terrifying." "Completely terrifying," she agreed, returning his smile through her tears. Yates reached out, cupping her cheek with his free hand. "Stay," he said simply. "Be my wife in truth, not just in name. Let's raise Grace together, maybe give her brothers and sisters someday. Let's build something real." "Yes," Olivia answered without hesitation. "Yes to all of it." He leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. When they separated, both were smiling like fools. "I should have done that months ago," Yates murmured. "Better late than never," Olivia replied, then pulled him back to her for another kiss, this one deeper, filled with the promise of things to come. That night, for the first time, they shared a bed as husband and wife in every sense. Their lovemaking was tender, unhurried, a discovery of each other that left them both breathless with wonder. Afterward, as Olivia lay in the circle of Yates's arms, she marveled at the journey that had brought her here. "I never thought I could be this happy again," she confessed in the darkness. "After everything that happened with Edward, I'd given up on finding love." "And I never thought I'd find it at all," Yates replied, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Then you arrived on my doorstep, pregnant and desperate, and turned my whole world upside down." Olivia chuckled. "Not exactly the most romantic beginning." "I disagree," Yates said. "I think it was perfect. We built something real brick by brick, something that will last." Their newfound happiness seemed to infuse the entire ranch with fresh energy. The men commented on the boss's improved mood. Mrs. Wilkins remarked on the way the house felt more like a home, and even little Grace seemed to sense the change, bestowing smiles on both her parents with generous abandon. But the shadow of Marcus Blackwell hadn't disappeared. In June, word came that the territorial marshal would be visiting Deer Lodge County to investigate the complaints against Blackwell, but not until August. In the meantime, the pressure on Evergreen Ranch continued. One morning in early July, Olivia was in the garden with Grace when the sound of approaching horses drew her attention. A group of riders was coming down the drive, 5 men, with Marcus Blackwell himself in the lead. Olivia had never met the man, but she'd heard enough descriptions to recognize him. Tall and broad, with iron gray hair and cold eyes, he carried himself with the arrogance of someone used to getting his way. She scooped Grace up and hurried toward the house, but Yates had already emerged from the barn, walking to intercept the riders. "Morning, Yeardley," Blackwell called, his voice carrying across the yard. "Fine day for a chat." Olivia paused on the porch, reluctant to go inside where she couldn't see what was happening. Yates glanced her way, a brief look that conveyed both reassurance and warning. "Blackwell," Yates acknowledged coolly, "what brings you to Evergreen?" Blackwell's gaze traveled from Yates to Olivia and Grace on the porch. "Heard congratulations are in order. Marriage, fatherhood, you've been busy." There was something ugly in his tone that made Olivia hold Grace tighter. "State your business," Yates said, his voice hard. "Simple enough. I've come to make you a final offer for this place. Double what I offered your father 5 years ago." Blackwell dismounted, his men remaining on horseback. "It's more than generous." "Not interested," Yates replied immediately. "Not at any price." Blackwell's expression darkened. "Don't be a fool, Yeardley. You've got a family to think about now. Things can get dangerous for a man with responsibilities." The threat was thinly veiled. Olivia saw Yates's shoulders tighten, but his voice remained steady. "I think you should leave now." "I'm trying to be reasonable here," Blackwell insisted, taking a step closer. "The marshal may be coming, but he'll be gone again soon enough. Then it'll be just you and me and this valley. Think about it." "I've thought about it," Yates said. "My answer won't change. This land stays in the Yeardley family." Blackwell's gaze shifted to Olivia again, his eyes lingering in a way that made her skin crawl. "Pretty wife you've got. Would be a shame if anything happened to her or that baby." Yates moved so quickly that Blackwell had no time to react. In an instant, he had the older man by the collar, his face inches from Blackwell's. "If you ever threaten my family again," Yates said, his voice deadly quiet, "it will be the last thing you do. Now get off my land." For a tense moment, it seemed like violence would erupt. Blackwell's men had their hands on their guns, and Charlie and the other ranch hands had emerged from the barn, armed and ready. Then Blackwell laughed, a sound without humor. "You've got spirit, Yeardley. I'll give you that." He looked pointedly at Yates's hands until they released his collar. "But spirit won't save this ranch. Think about my offer. You've got till the marshal arrives to decide." With that, he remounted and led his men away. Yates remained standing in the yard until they were out of sight, then turned and strode to the porch. "Are you all right?" he asked Olivia, his eyes scanning her face. "We're fine," she assured him, though her heart was still racing. "What will we do?" Yates took Grace from her arms, holding his daughter close as if to reassure himself of her safety. "We'll be ready for whatever comes next." The days following Blackwell's visit were tense. Yates doubled the guards on the property and insisted that Olivia and Grace not venture far from the house. The normal rhythms of ranch life continued, but there was an undercurrent of anxiety that affected everyone. Olivia threw herself into preparations for the marshal's visit, gathering documents and witness statements. If legal means could end Blackwell's threat, she was determined to see it happen. July gave way to August, bringing heat that shimmered over the Montana landscape. Grace celebrated her 8th month with new accomplishments: 2 tiny teeth, more determined crawling, and what sounded suspiciously like da-da when Yates entered a room. "She said it," Yates exclaimed the first time it happened, his face alight with joy. "Did you hear that?" "I heard," Olivia confirmed, her heart full at the sight of his happiness. There was no question now that Grace was his daughter in every way that mattered. Marshal James Sullivan arrived in Deer Lodge on August 10th, a tall, taciturn man with a reputation for fairness. He spent 3 days interviewing witnesses, examining evidence, and visiting both Evergreen Ranch and the Blackwell property. On the 4th day, he summoned both Yates and Blackwell to the sheriff's office in town. Olivia insisted on accompanying Yates, unwilling to let him face this alone. With Grace left in Mrs. Wilkins's capable care, they rode into Deer Lodge together, uncertain what the day would bring. The sheriff's office was crowded when they arrived. Blackwell was already there with 2 of his men, along with Sheriff Daniels, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. Marshal Sullivan sat behind the desk, his expression inscrutable. "Mr. and Mrs. Yeardley," he acknowledged as they entered. "Please, have a seat." The tension in the room was palpable as Sullivan shuffled through the papers before him. "I've completed my investigation into the complaints filed by Mr. Yeardley against Mr. Blackwell," he finally said. "I've found sufficient evidence to support charges of intimidation, property damage, and assault." Blackwell's face darkened, but Sullivan held up a hand to forestall any outburst. "Additionally," the marshal continued, "in the course of my investigation, I've uncovered evidence of water rights tampering, fraudulent land claims, and witness intimidation by Mr. Blackwell and his associates." He looked directly at Sheriff Daniels, as well as evidence of corruption within the local law enforcement. Daniels paled visibly, while Blackwell's expression turned thunderous. "This is outrageous," he blustered. "You have no jurisdiction here, Sullivan." "As territorial marshal, I have exactly the jurisdiction needed," Sullivan replied evenly. "Marcus Blackwell, you're under arrest for the aforementioned crimes. Sheriff Daniels, you're relieved of your duties pending further investigation." What followed was a chaotic scene as Blackwell attempted to flee, only to be subdued by Sullivan and his deputies. Daniels surrendered without resistance, his face a mask of shame. When order was finally restored, Sullivan approached Yates and Olivia, who had watched the proceedings with stunned disbelief. "It'll take time for the courts to sort everything out," he warned them, "but Blackwell won't be threatening anyone for the foreseeable future. I've recommended a special election for a new sheriff, and in the meantime, my deputy will oversee law enforcement in the county." "Thank you, Marshal," Yates said, shaking the man's hand firmly. "We owe you a debt we can't repay," Sullivan shrugged. "Just doing my job." "Your wife's detailed documentation made it easier. Not many would have been so thorough." Olivia blushed at the praise. "We just wanted peace for our family." "And now you should have it," Sullivan assured them. "Blackwell's reign over this valley is finished." The ride back to Evergreen Ranch was quiet, both Yates and Olivia processing the morning's events. As they crested the rise that gave them a view of their home in the distance, Yates reined in his horse. "Look at that," he said softly. Olivia followed his gaze. The ranch spread out below them, the sturdy house, the barns and corrals, the green pastures where cattle grazed peacefully, the mountains rising majestically in the background. It was beautiful and now, truly theirs without threat. "I never thought I'd say this," Yates continued, "but I'm grateful for everything that happened. If Blackwell hadn't been pressuring my parents all those years ago, my father might not have insisted I learn the law as well as ranching. If I hadn't known about legal documentation, I might not have insisted on marrying you that day, might have just hired you as a housekeeper." Olivia smiled, understanding what he was saying. "And if Edward hadn't been who he was, I might never have found my way here, to you." Yates reached across the space between their horses, taking her hand in his. "I love you, Olivia Yeardley. You and Grace are everything to me. And we love you," she replied simply. "This is where we belong, where I belong." "Let's go home," Yates said, releasing her hand with a final squeeze. They rode down the hillside toward Evergreen Ranch, toward the future they would build together. The years passed, marking their progress with moments both ordinary and extraordinary. Grace grew from a determined crawler to a fearless toddler, running across the ranch with boundless energy. She had Olivia's dark hair and delicate features, but there was something of Yates in her too, not in her blood, but in her spirit, her stubbornness, her love of the land. On Grace's second birthday, Olivia shared news that brought tears to Yates's eyes she was expecting again. Thomas Yeardley arrived in the spring of 1879, a robust boy with his father's stormy eyes and strong grip. 2 years later, Emma joined their family, followed by Samuel in 1884. The ranch prospered under their care. Yates expanded the operation, breeding finer cattle and horses, while Olivia managed the household and maintained detailed records of their business. They gained a reputation throughout the territory for fair dealings and quality stock. Grace grew into a beautiful young woman with her mother's intelligence and her father's determination. She showed a remarkable talent for working with horses, something that filled Yates with pride. Thomas inherited his father's head for business, while Emma displayed artistic talents that neither parent could claim. Little Samuel, the baby of the family, seemed to combine all their best qualities. On a warm evening in the summer of 1896, Olivia and Yates sat on the porch of Evergreen Ranch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Grace had married a young rancher from a neighboring property, and their 3 children were frequent visitors. Thomas, now managing much of the ranch operations, had recently become engaged to the schoolteacher's daughter. "Did you ever imagine this?" Olivia asked, her hand finding Yates's as it had countless times over the years. Though there was silver now among the dark of her hair and lines of laughter framed her eyes, she was still beautiful to him. "Not in my wildest dreams," Yates admitted. "That day you walked up to the door, I thought I was offering charity to a desperate woman." He smiled, lifting her hand to his lips. "I had no idea I was saving myself." "We saved each other," Olivia corrected gently, "and built all this together." Around them, Evergreen Ranch spread out in the golden light of sunset, larger now, more prosperous, but still the same place where they had found each other 20 years before. The land that had been in the Yeardley family for generations would continue, through their children and grandchildren, a legacy of love that had begun with a desperate plea and an unexpected offer. "No regrets?" Yates asked, though he already knew the answer. Olivia shook her head, leaning against the shoulder of the man who had been her rock through prosperity and hardship, joy and sorrow. "Not one," she replied, her voice filled with the certainty of a choice well made and a life well lived. "Not a single one." As the sun dipped below the mountains, casting long shadows across the land they'd nurtured together, they sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the fruits of their love, a family, a home, a legacy that had begun with the courage to take a chance on each other. In the distance, Grace called her children in for supper, her voice carrying on the evening breeze. The little ones ran toward the house, their laughter echoing across the yard. Yates and Olivia rose together, hand in hand, to join their family for another meal, another evening, another cherished moment in the life they'd built from the most unlikely of beginnings. It had started with a pregnant woman begging for work and a cowboy offering his name instead. It had grown into something neither could have imagined, a love story written across the Montana landscape, as enduring as the mountains themselves.